a shame. All we wanted to do was suffer in the sun with you, and they would not allow it. This is We Have Concerns. Hi, Jeff Canada.
Hi, Anthony Carboni.
Hello, concerned citizens. Jeff, I, of course, as you are, as everyone who listens to this show is, real inquisitive, real curious about the human brain.
Sure.
What's big dumb lump. There? Yeah, what a big dumb lump. What is it? What's happening?
What's going on in there? My brain says to my brain.
Yeah. One part of my big dumb lump says, hey, big dumb lump, how do we work? And the other part of the big dumb lump goes, great question.
Great. Fascinating question.
That is a phenomenal question. And I wish anyone had the answer for you. But we are learning more and more about the human brain every day. I mean, not us. When I say we, that's sort of not you and I. We don't learn much of anything at any point. No, people have tried to teach us, and it turns out I remember on one of my report cards in elementary school, it just said unteachable.
Yeah,
refuses to be taught.
When people say big dumb lump, we assume they're talking about our brains, but it might just be us specifically. You know,
I literally did get something on my report card that says refuses to be taught.
Seriously?
Yeah,
that tracks.
I think it was like real early elementary school before they even give you letter grades, when you get like satisfactory, outstanding. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And one of the comments,
it's not doesn't listen. It's not doesn't follow instructions. It's refuses to be taught.
Refuses to be taught. Refuses to be taught.
Fine. No, he hears everything I say, but in applying it in any way to lessons, he refuses. He shan't.
That's sort of the way the conversation went, if I remember correctly. is my mother was like, she says that you understand everything and that you're smart, and then you just refuse to like do anything. I was like, it's stupid.
You refuse to apply it in any way.
Yeah. I remember having one conversation with my mother where she's like, you're sitting there, you're in school, there's nothing else to do but school. Why won't you just do the school? I was like, don't like it. I will protest every day about how I do not like it. She's like, there's literally nothing else for you to do. I was like, disagree. I'm finding all kinds of things, obviously. But you know, that's refusing to be taught and you know, the human brain's capacity to learn and change are two different things. I refused to access that part of my brain.
Your brain was changing and adapting all the time.
Yeah.
You just weren't letting much in to affect that change.
Some people would say maladapting. But I, once again, do not listen to those people. Yeah. But we've talked about how as we are learning more things about regions of the brain, and as we are able to watch and record brain waves and MRI scans from different parts of the brain, we are learning a lot about how to change the way the brain functions. And one of the things we've talked about before is transdermal cranial stimulation.
Shocking your brain.
Shocking your brain. It's a low, you know, as opposed to like a quick electric shock, I would say less a joy buzzer and more a massage chair.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The idea is
you want to get it done real quick, and then you just amp that puppy up.
Yeah, like when you have those in between flight like massage places, and they have like the different prices, and you're just like, how do we fit a 60-minute into a 15? Not that I don't want the 60-minute, but I got a flight to catch.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
I ain't got 60 minutes kind of time. You know what I'm saying?
60 minutes. Listen, I will not listen, and I cannot be taught. I want 60 minutes of massage in 15 minutes. And I refuse to listen to why it won't work.
I want you to make me relax, but I ain't got time to relax. So let's do this.
That actually might be the most me thing. Like, I need 60 minutes of relaxation in 15 minutes. Stat.
And I refuse to understand why that's impossible.
I refuse. But no, this is a low and constant amount of electricity that's applied to specific regions within the brain to basically the brain sends basically electrical signals. So what we are looking to do is open up certain connections, make certain connections easier. We've talked about this before in conjunction with things like oh, if we do this to the language listening and language learning and processing centers of the brain, maybe you can learn a foreign language quicker.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but this requires you to you sit in the lab. They put the things on your brain. They're monitoring you the whole time. What we really want, and America's jackass Elon Musk has talked about this multiple times. He wants to put that chip in your brain that you can constantly use.
Right. It's an app on your phone that says, learn me language.
Learn me language,
ups the aperture in the chip in your neck.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you're speaking French.
Well, after 3 pre-roll ads.
Exactly.
After 3 pre-roll ads, you're speaking some French. So this story was sent in to us by Synergy himself, Z Mansfield.
Nice.
Thank you. As always. This is a team right at UCSF, our old stomping grounds.
Oh, up in the Bay. Nice.
Up in the Bay Area.
My dad, an alumnus of UCSF.
Oh, wow. And if that is not the most glowing endorsement of a college, I don't know what is. Go to the same college as the Canadas.
Yeah.
It's a storied institution.
Yeah. My dad's name right there on the wall. If
you're
you
a bit like,
just keep looking.
Yeah. You're a bit like the would you say you're more the Weasleys or the Malfoys of UCSF?
I mean, definitely the Weasleys.
Definitely the Weasleys.
I mean,
that's something. That's definitely
not
something a Malfoy would say.
But not like the cool, counterculture, making they're inventing their own candies. Weasleys. No, it's more like the dad who just sort of keeps his head down and
working class hand me down sweater Weasleys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
UCSF, of course, has a great medical research and just great science departments as a whole. And one of the things that this team has been working on is DBS. So instead of transdermal cranial stimulation, where the thing sits on your scalp, we're talking about deep brain stimulation.
How do you get it deeper?
You put it inside.
Nice. This is inserting just sort of the wiring in your brain, or we're talking full-on chip in your skull?
This is electrodes implanted in the brain, which is regulated by a device implanted somewhere else in the body. So if you can imagine somebody that has maybe a pacemaker, or somebody that has maybe one of the insulin pumps installed into their body, the self-regulating insulin pumps.
Yeah.
It's a bit like that,
sure.
But for your brain. So the reason they wanted to do this is you could come in for a few sessions if you have something like in this particular study, they focused on a woman with depression. You could come in for like weekly sessions, right? And the idea is they put the transdermal electrodes on your brain. You have like an hour of that. They monitor your brain, and they try over time to sort of train your brain to make different connections, right? Using the neuroplasticity of the brain. That's one way to do it. The problem with that is it doesn't always take. It's like taking a language lesson once a week. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't over time. But for people that have sort of severe symptoms, or people who need more constant regulation, that's when they want to go to the deep brain stimulation.
Transdermal ain't going to cut it.
Transdermal ain't going to cut it, baby.
Yeah.
You got to get in there. You got to get into that wetware. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You gotta cut right into that big dumb lump.
So we're doing this on to humans? Humans are volunteering for this? Because it feels like this is pretty intrusive into the brain. Drill into your skull, yeah?
So this was done yes, it's extremely, they got to put electrodes deep into your brain. So yeah. And so instead of doing this to a group of people, this was done to one patient who is being identified as Sarah. So Sarah is a 36-year-old woman who had been living with depression since childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And she was deeply, deeply depressed, had had long periods of deep depression and suicidal thinking and things like that. So this is somebody who is on the high end of the depression spectrum. So for Sarah, who had tried multiple types of therapy and medication and things like that, she was like, yeah, let's go. I'm willing to try this.
It must have been pretty severe to go that length. But
yeah, exactly. And, from a data standpoint and the scientific standpoint, what's sort of good about that, I mean, the silver lining, if there is one, is that it's easier to see gradations of change in somebody with symptoms that severe. So she went under. They developed this DBS technique that they call personalized closed loop neurostimulation. They put the electrodes into Sarah's brain. And basically, it's a constant, because the device is implanted into her, they are constantly watching what sort of signals are happening in her brain all the time. She comes into the lab once a week or something like that, and they do a regular fMRI on her, and they are pinpointing where in her brain her depression stems from, right?
Because this is not just connected to one point in the brain. There are multiple electrodes, I guess, or whatever you would call them, multiple points that it is stimulating.
Yeah, she's wired up.
Yeah.
So
they can sort of dynamically choose where to increase the voltage.
Exactly. So in Sarah,
wild.
I believe it was, they were looking for this sort of erratic brain activity. And in Sarah's case, it was in the ventral striatum, which is the decision-making part of the brain. And then the amygdala, which, as we know, is that little walnut that is your emotional response. That's the fear and anxiety, the fight or flight is in the amygdala. So they wired up, particularly they were looking at the ventral striatum and the amygdala. And as she was coming in over time, they were tweaking the device to look for the erratic signals from those areas and send basically almost like noise canceling headphones, send an equal and opposite signal in the brain.
Now, I don't want to jump ahead and predict how this is going to go.
But please
do. My understanding is that this was tried once before with Jason Statham. They did it just with jumper cables and a car battery.
Right.
But
go on.
It really unlocked a lot of potential. And he was able to do, I mean, the downside was he kept needing to do it over and over again, which seems problematic, or at least
you're talking about the famous study performed by Dr. Crank. And
yes. And in the documentary entitled Dr. Crank.
Entitled Crank. And the difference between Statham, we'll call him Jason Statham. That's how they identified the patient. We obviously don't know the real name. The difference between Jason Statham and Sarah is Jason Statham was more about a sort of physical lethargy. It was about
It was nothing about depressed about Jason Statham.
It was about him keeping his activity levels up for health reasons, and so they needed to help him, kind of do that. Whereas Sarah is really more about a mental fatigue.
I see.
If I understand correctly, and once again, I'm not a neuroscientist. I cannot be taught, but Sarah said that the first stimulation, she said, almost instantaneous relief.
Wow.
She said, when I first received stimulation, the aha moment occurred. I felt the most intensely joyous sensation, and my depression was a distant nightmare for a moment. The expression made me realize that my depression was not a moral failing. It was a disorder that could be treated, and there was more hope for recovery.
So is this, do they go into the methodology? Is this a constant, is it a pulse that happens, or is it more of a constant application of electricity to the brain?
This is this is situation specific. So after the monitoring sessions, when they find out, where the sort of undesirable activity is coming from, the implant then looks for those moments of that activity during the day and sends sort of localized and specific responses, unlike transdermal or transdermal stimulation, which is basically you come in for an hour and it's the same amount of voltage for an entire hour, right? They don't really mess with it. So this is a very specific and very tailored sort of treatment. And then of course she constantly comes in and they monitor and they recalibrate. This is fascinating to me for two reasons. Number one is that quote of, I realized it wasn't a moral failing. There's such a misunderstanding of sort of mental disorders, particularly when it comes to emotional disorders. That's sort of like, the low end of the spectrum of people who understand depression are just like, hey, just go outside and exercise and cheer up.
Right.
Like
look on the bright side.
Have you tried looking on the bright side? That's a great thing to say to as a depressed person. I think that's a great thing to say to depressed people. It's like, but have you tried not?
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things because it reminds me that I should be trying not. And then, sometimes it's like tying a string around your finger. And so I look down, or it's like, or like setting a Siri reminder, try not to be depressed.
Yeah.
Have you thought about that? And then I go, oh shit, I forgot to not be depressed today. And then I just move on.
Change your behavior.
Completely happy.
Yeah.
But because that is, even on the higher end, it's like, well, there's neuroplasticity. And if you have the right routines and the right this and the right that, you can battle it and you can beat depression. And it's like, yes, that is a possibility. There is neuroplasticity, but it is a physical thing. If we understand, like, we understand when like somebody has a thyroid problem and it's like, dude, your thyroid just doesn't do what it's supposed to do and you're going to be on medication and we can't change that. That's your thyroid. But when you say depression, people are like, have you tried smiling? They say even if you smile, even if you don't feel like it, it helps your brain to be happy. It's like, oh shit, I'll put that in the reminders underneath. But so I love that, like, because of that, because you hear that all the time, people who suffer from depression or anxiety or something like that, even though we know better, sometimes you're just like, man, I don't understand why I can't just get over this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, dude, it's a physical wiring problem.
Right.
There's something with the plumbing.
The other thing that's so fascinating to me is, how little we really understand about consciousness, because it is so clear that Sarah can sit there and sort of observe herself experiencing these things, right? She can have that perspective of, oh, the application of this stimuli changed my internal life. But there's some piece of her that can sort of set aside and observe that.
Yeah.
It's wild that we are at once the sum of our bioelectric impulses, but at the same time, there's some piece that also can sort of watch that and comment on it and be aware of it. Like, it's so mystifying. Like, what is that conscious part that can sort of, where does that place live?
Yeah, where in the big dumb lump is that? Poke that part.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's funny because like even when I am suffering, like when I'm having a depressive episode or when I'm having an anxiety attack or whatever, there is a part of my brain that's like, and this is the part of the brain that you can train more and more. That's that sort of mindful part that's like, hey buddy. It's like it's the part of my brain. It's like almost the Clippy part of my brain is what I think of it as. Not like the cool internet porn Clippy that we all talk about, but like the Clippy, it's just this little like part of me that pops up and is like, hey buddy, it looks like you're having an anxiety attack. Yeah. Do you want to breathe deeper right now? You know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. Or like, hey buddy, it's noon. Do you want to get out of bed? It's it's probably time, and there are so many different parts of the brain that like are doing different things, and it all comes together into consciousness. And it's like, I know I feel this way. How do I change it? I can't seem to change it. But the other thing that I think about with this is like, it do be spooky how much they changed somebody's very nature.
Right. Yeah. And what is happening there, right? Clearly, Sarah self-reports it to be a very positive feeling. And so one can't help but feel glad for her, right? That she's
in this case
getting help.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think of like, did you ever see Harrison Bergeron?
No.
Harrison Bergeron was based on this Kurt Vonnegut short story, and Sean Astin was in it. It was about a world where everybody wears these helmets, and the helmets make you feel happy.
Yeah.
But the helmets were also making the population dumber. It was a very Vonnegut thing, and it's very, it's a little bit, it's sort of that Vonnegut thing where he uses a very reductive sci-fi premise to like tell a very good emotional human story.
Mm-hmm.
But I think about that, right? Is like once we have the man, the fucking Facebook whistleblower this week,
right?
Where it was like, hey, yeah, we were manipulating you to feel angry, and we don't even have access to your brain yet.
Right. Yeah.
Just wait until we have access to your brain, my dude.
Yeah.
Because we are like,
it's a little terrifying. It's a little worrisome. How, I mean, if you bring in the whole external stimulation and how malleable we are in that regard, then you go, well, hey, we can apply electricity to your brain and really be able to dial it in.
It seems like you're depressed at work. That's probably not because you work 60 hours a week for no benefits and very little money, because other people aren't depressed. So it's probably you. So we're just going to flip the switch to make it so you don't worry about the fact that unions have no strength and there is no money for you. And you know what I mean? Like that's a very dystopian way to look at it. But there is a fundamental question here about what is reality? How do we experience it? And how much can we change it until responsibly before it is an irresponsible change? And I think in this setting, in this study with this group of people, this is a very good application of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's hard to find fault here, but it does feel like, what does it open up in the future in regard to how you can alter the brain?
When it's a musk.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so intrigued by this stuff, and especially when we talk about what we used to talk about, which was the notion of amplifying the capabilities of the brain and making you learn things quicker and sort of these sort of superhuman abilities that the brain is capable of with some of the stimulation. But that's a whole other ethical side, right? What does that mean for our futures?
Right. And, particularly in a society where healthcare and things like this are tied to a certain amount of personal wealth and capitalist concerns, where it's like, oh, well, I got the chip in my brain that makes it easy for me to learn this stuff. And so now I'm better at this stuff. And so now I get a better job. And so now I go to a better school, and I do, and then it becomes like, oh, so in order to compete in this society, I got to have the good brain chip. You know what I mean? This is all a very long way away, but these are things that you want to start thinking about them now as this technology starts. The UCSF researchers said that, in order for this to work, in order for this to be widely used, this worked in a single case. Transdermal stimulation has worked and hasn't worked for different people in different measures, and they're not entirely sure why. This was constant monitoring of Sarah, constant appointments and check-ins, and particular tailoring to her. They say right now, if this was going to be a treatment that could help more people, it's going to require a lot of simplification.
Sure.
Right now, the device that they're using and the procedure, it is commercially available, but they said that if you were to get this treatment right now, it would be like $30,000 out of pocket.
Right.
So it's not available for everyone yet. And
the good news
and they're
is,
not even sure it's going to work for everyone, right? It worked
the good
for
news
Sarah.
Is you feel so happy about it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, only $30,000. A minute ago I thought that was very expensive, but now I see the value in it.
Let me ask you that question that brings up, which I think is sort of the central moral or ethical question, which is there a difference between pure, authentic contentment and happiness and artificially stimulated contentment and happiness, right?
Usually a hangover.
Yeah, right. Well, but I mean it truthfully. If you have something that provides the kind of joy that a high can without any of the health downsides.
Mm-hmm. Well,
is there something morally objectionable about a population that is just super happy to be here all the time and just like experiences joy nonstop from artificial means, but it is indistinguishable from sort of authentically achieved joy?
Well, I think we need to, in order to kind of dissect that, we need to decide if we are drawing that line specifically because this technology seems novel and a little bit scary to us, because you could ask the same question about my antidepressants.
Yeah, sure. Right.
Is the antidepressants don't cause happiness. They're not happy pills, but is the absence of depression and my productivity and all of that stuff that I get when I take my medication, is that real or is that manufactured? Is there a difference for me? And I think, the answer for me is the difference is this is the only way I get it. Right. So because there is something in my brain that doesn't allow me to have it naturally. Now, if this becomes a voluntary thing and it's like, oh, the kid's puppy died, and so I cranked the knob up to 7 so they wouldn't worry about it. Like, that's spooky, right? But that's not really what we're talking about. If we're talking about this medically, like the way it's being used, I don't think there's a difference at all. I think the difference, because you're talking about a faulty machinery. If I replace the cartridge in my printer because the printer's out of ink, is it a different printer? No. I just put new ink in it so it functions. And I think that's more what we're talking about with this. When it gets to becoming a voluntary cool toy, that's something.
Right.
That's something to consider. Then you get into Harrison Bergeron territory.
The sci-fi version of this is, you're working 100 hours a week, but you are so happy all the time because the electricity is telling your brain to be happy.
Yeah.
You're working yourself to the bone. And in the sci-fi version, there's always a little piece of you underneath the smile.
That knows
and is tortured. But I genuinely wonder if that little piece isn't there, if there is some switch that can be flipped to just feeling great all the time, regardless. Is there a difference between that feeling, that artificially imposed feeling of contentment and happiness, and one that is achieved by natural means amidst all the natural miseries of life?
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah.
I honestly, I don't know that it's something that you and I will ever have to worry about.
No, certainly not.
I think that's something that is more for.
Awesome.
I think it's maybe even, I think maybe in your kid's lifetime.
Yeah.
Another 50 years of researching this technology. Oh, for sure. For sure. In your kids' lifetimes, for sure.
Yeah. When Musk is, more machine than man.
Yeah. When Musk is brain in, he wouldn't put his brain into a jar. He'd put his brain into a sleek, cool robot.
Yeah.
That dabs
dances.
And smokes joints, just to let you know that it's still cool. It's still one of the people.
Weirdly, the robot also has hair plugs,
weirdly, there's a tiny part of the robot that hates what's going on and is screaming inside, which shouldn't even be possible. But the robot knows. The robot knows it's complicit.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, before you give all your money to Bizarro Iron Man. The Marvel what if version of what if Iron Man never had that arc and remained a douchebag. Why don't you give some of your money to two people who refuse to learn and run an educational podcast anyway?
Bizarro Wonder Twins over here.
That's what we are. That's what we are. Do you want to be water or animals? Kids, ask your parents.
I mean, if you're really asking me, I feel like water was the better choice ever. I mean, other than the fact that they kept turning him into just a pail of water, which that's just a fault of bad imagination.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, he could have turned himself into a vapor cloud. He could have done
there's
anything.
So much.
But they turned him into a pail of water that his sister could then turn into an eagle and carry. And I always wondered where the pail came from, because they would have had to carry a pail, because the pail is not made of water.
Yeah, the pail's not him. The pail is what he's inside.
Hey, this is exactly the kind of stuff that you can discuss with us on our Discord. If that's not worth $1 a month, I don't know what is.
Exactly. And it's so easy. All you got to do is go to patreon.com/wehaveconcerns, and you'll find a way to give us $1 a month to get access to that very cool Discord with tons of great folks and awesome conversations. But if you've got a little more scratch, if you've got more than $1 to spare a month, you can get even more as well. You can get bonus audio. Just last week, we had Josh McCouga as a guest on the show. He did a full bonus episode with us, available
great episode.
Exclusively. Yeah, great episode.
People really enjoyed it.
Exclusively to patrons. And there's tons of bonus audio. All those conversations that you hear us having at the beginning of the show, boom, yours as a patron. Check it out.
Patreon.com/wehaveconcerns. Jeff, before we go into your story, I do want to ask you one question. There's a bit of a debate going on the Discord with regards to the bonus conversations that we release.
Okay, I'm not aware of this.
There are some people that say they will not listen to an episode until the bonus conversation is released, and then they want to listen to them chronologically. Whereas
makes sense.
Well, yeah, it makes sense. But we have always thought of the bonus episode as its own thing that exists as a perfect crystal snowflake of its own that can be listened to at any time. Because that end of the conversation that we do at the beginning of every regular episode is meant to be like a weird non sequitur where it's like, why would they be saying that? So I've always thought that you should listen to the bonus conversation after the episode.
Interesting. I mean, I do see how that might be really desirable to get that smooth transition into the episode. You hear how it ends and then you hear how it begins, and it's like the back cover of the Mad magazine when it folds together and you see the message.
But I think it's like watching the prequel before the original movie. You know what I mean? Like the prequel only has the fun context.
Right.
Because you watched the original film.
But we recorded the prequel before the original movie in practice.
But there's something to be said for authorial intent, Jeffrey. Is there
Can we not consider the authorial intent of our dumb podcast? Yeah. Anyway,
feel free to weigh in on that. Feel free to weigh in on that on the Discord. But I think it's very interesting.
What is the? Oh, damn it!
It seems to be about half and half.
Yeah, I was going to say what's the freaking way they describe watching the Star Wars movies? The
machete order?
The machete order. Yeah, what's the machete order of We Have Concerns? The
machete order is you listen to the Brock Life episode, the very first Brock Life episode, and then you skip to when we came back from break.
You miss, I don't know, 600 episodes in there, but yeah.
But then you go back and you watch them later. You listen to them later for the impact.
Awesome.
That's what I think.
Hey, it is Spooktober. We are officially in Spooktober.
A joyous Spooktober to those who celebrate.
Indeed. Are you feeling the creepy crawlies? Are you excited about the spine tinglies?
I love it, man. I'm watching horror movies. I finally watched Malignant, which you told me to watch, and everybody's been telling me to watch.
I mean, we don't have to go into a review.
Well, I'm not going to go into a deep review, but here's what I'll say. The first 2 acts of Malignant feel like you're watching the parody of the horror movie that's in the horror movie.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It's absolutely terrible. It's a fun idea. I'm not gonna spoil the twist of Malignant. It's a fun idea. The third act is pretty dope and weird. But that movie's bonkers. I appreciate how bonkers it is.
Yeah.
I appreciate it for the bonkersness, but boy, is it's good bad is what I'll say. It's a good bad movie.
Yeah. I thought you'd appreciate it, at least for where it goes.
I love when somebody gets to do exactly what they want, and clearly James Wan gets to do whatever he wants now.
Yeah, whatever he wants. So anyway, it is Spooktober, so I thought we should do a fun, spooky, scary kind of story, and one was provided for us on the Discord by none other
Stroke of Midnight
than Greg Crumbliss. Greg, having supplied several stories in the past, we appreciate it, Greg.
Thank you, Greg. Are you trying to hint to me that it's almost time to give Greg a nickname?
I think he's close. I think he's real close.
I'll tell you what, Crumbliss, if you get on one more time, I'll give you a nickname.
Nice. This is a story about space mummies.
Fuck yes!
Space mummies. This is a story from astronomy.com about what happens to dead bodies on Mars.
Is this something we're worried about? Are there enough dead bodies on Mars?
If we're going to Mars, we have explained this many times. People gonna die.
Oh.
Mars wants to kill you. Space
just about everybody's gonna die.
Yeah. There's gonna be a lot of death on Mars. And guess what? It makes zero sense to haul those bodies back to Earth. The amount of effort, expense, energy it would take to get the remains of dead humans back from Mars. Sadly, setting aside our maybe sympathies and emotional response, it makes no sense. It makes no sense to bring the bodies back.
No. But by the time the body gets back, you will be dead.
Right.
There's nobody to send the body back to.
Right.
There'd just be some poor schmuck is receiving all the dead bodies from Mars going, like, there's literally nowhere to put these. What do I do with these?
So many. We need another planet for this planet's dead bodies.
You got to notify the next of kin. Next of kin died 30 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is an article on astronomy.com that is a thought experiment about what do we do about all the dead bodies that potentially would happen as we settle Mars. If we're settling on Mars, if we're going to Mars and having any kind of long-term stay as a civilization, what are we going to do about these bodies? Well,
okay, so let me guess something here.
Sure.
Decomposition of bodies.
Yeah.
Requires a couple things. It requires a bunch of creepy crawly organisms that we have here on Earth.
Yep, don't got those on Mars.
To break them down, and it requires a certain amount of temperature to break down the matter for our gooey biological bits to fall apart, which I don't know if Mars is at the temperature. Do bodies even decompose on Mars?
Great question. And that is exactly what this article goes into. There are several steps that happen in the decomposition of a human body or any organic body on Earth. They don't always happen in order. There's a lot of overlap of the stages, but generally speaking, you have algor mortis, livor mortis, and rigor mortis. So algor mortis is when the body cools.
Which are, of course, the names of the Beagle Boys.
The three mortises.
The three mortises.
You will be visited by three mortises. So algor mortis is when the body cools. Livor mortis is when the blood in the body begins to pool due to gravity. And rigor mortis, of course, is when muscles stiffen. We all know about rigor mortis. But then what happens is a process called autolysis, which is basically cells in your body digesting themselves. It's enzymes in your own body destroying your cells. So that's autolysis. And then putrefaction happens, which is all the gross, yucky stuff of, skin dislodging, bloating, all of the gross, nightmarish versions of death.
in a horror movie, because it is Spooktober, what basically happens is somebody dies, they go straight into rigor mortis and then putrefaction within
Right.
a period of 4 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, like you said, various things feed on the body. I mean, obviously, this doesn't happen if you're in a coffin or you're, embalmed or whatever. But in the natural state of things, insects, bacteria, even things like birds and reptiles and stuff will feed on the remains of the body. It's all part of the circle of death, where you, the energy biomass is returned to the ecosystem and that energy is preserved and brought into other things. Okay.
Okay.
So now we're on Mars and a few things are different. First, like I said, we don't got those bacteria. We don't got those external creatures. There's no stuff to feed on the body. Also,
what about wolves? They got wolves?
Well, they got Mars wolves, Martian wolves.
Buzzards?
Yeah. Martian buzzards.
Vultures, Martian vultures that circle over the body.
Yeah. They call them the red birds.
Mm-hmm.
No, so as you mentioned, temperature is a big factor here. Mars is cold. Basically averages around negative 81 degrees Fahrenheit, which is negative 63 degrees Celsius.
It's too cold.
It's way too cold. It's way too cold for a lot of this stuff to happen, although there is something called sublimation. Sublimation is the transfer of a solid directly into a gas without going through liquid form first. Mm. So you can observe this if, you live in really cold environment and you have wet clothes and you hang them outside in the winter, they will still dry. It will take longer, but they will dry without first turning to water. They'll be frozen, it'll freeze solid and then it'll turn to vapor without going to the liquid form in between.
It's also the way the Doctor regenerates.
Oh, really? Is that how that works? Doctor?
Via sublimation. Yeah, the Doctor turns into a bunch of gaseous energy and then turns into the new Doctor. So I would imagine that's sublimation, because I am very good at science and that is a real thing.
So basically what would happen if you buried a body on Mars, if we said, okay, the best way to deal with this is to take our dead and put them in the ground like we used to do on Earth here, or still do in some places, then what would happen is sublimation would basically desiccate the body. It would remove all the moisture from the body. The moisture in the body would freeze solid, right? Because of the temperature of Mars. And then it would turn into a vapor, water vapor, and go into the atmosphere. But it wouldn't turn to liquid first, so there wouldn't be any of that damage to the cells. So you'd have near perfect mummification of a body. Space mummies. In fact, they said it would almost be difficult to perceive any of the normal things we would see from a dead body. Like you would just see a dried out human. And they compared this to, I'm sure you read those stories about the bodies they found in those bogs. They found bodies in the, they were like, they called them bog bodies, I think. But they're like, there was no oxygen in the body. These, I can't remember what part of the country or world that was in. I'm sorry. But basically these bodies fell into these bogs and there's no oxygen in the water. And so they basically were perfectly mummified. Right. That's kind of what would happen. And so you get these horrific, perfect mummified corpses, which not ideal, right? Because there's no creatures to feed on them or to break them down. And at a certain point, if we're filling up a gravesite, it's just going to be full of mummy bodies.
It's just piles of mummies. Dude, there's nothing cool about going to Mars.
Nothing cool.
There's literally nothing cool.
Yeah.
I remember we've talked about this before, but you remember when they first announced hey, sign up for Mars 1. We're going to send regular people. And we were all like, we got to sign up. We got to go to Mars. Imagine being one of the first people to Mars. And then the more you look into it, you're like, there's nothing good about this.
No, you're going to die and turn into a space mummy.
That's
The
it.
good news is there's a scientific background for my spec script, space mummies.
Hey, finally. You've been saying for years, you've been bringing that script around for years. You're like, I'm telling you, Space Mummies is going to be relevant.
Yeah. And they told me it wasn't plausible, Anthony.
It's the most plausible.
It is now the most plausible script we've ever written together.
Honestly, not a high bar. But I'm glad we have a new front runner.
Yeah.
I just Space Mummies. So, okay, this is a great thing to think about, right? Because we're going to be colonizing, we're going to be terraforming, but it's going to take years and years and years and years and years.
Yeah.
What are we going to do with all them mummies?
Well, of course, the next suggestion people have is cremation.
Isn't that going to be incredibly tough to do on Mars?
Yes, that's the problem. Cremation, I don't know if you are aware of this, but cremation is accomplished in cremation chambers that are kept in excess of 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
These are hours of time it takes to cremate a body in a wildly inefficient thing. The energy required is just, it would be stupid to build a cremation center on Mars. Stupid.
Well, there was a story in the news this week about how much carbon, like we thought that cremation was the better way to go for the environment because of the space that human bodies take up and the resources it takes to like coffins and all this and the funeral industry. But now we're finding that the carbon that's released from the very process of heating these chambers and then releasing the human remains into the atmosphere takes up a huge amount of energy.
Right.
And creates a huge amount of carbon.
And when you're talking about, a colony on Mars, energy is at a premium, right? You got to account for all that. The economy of energy is such that it just makes zero sense to build a crematorium.
Well, because first of all, you said it's negative 60 degrees or negative 80 degrees Fahrenheit, something like that.
Yeah.
So number one, you're talking about pressurizing and regulating the temperature in the colony itself to something that's comfortable for humans to live in, which is going to take a large amount of energy. And then you're saying, and then in the middle of that colony, which we're already trying to keep it like we're going to say it's probably 72 degrees. We're going to say that every woman on Mars is going to be just a little too cold. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Just like your average office building, it's going to be like, hey, 72, pretty comfy. And every woman on Mars is going to be like, fuck you, fuck you. So we did an episode on this in the past, by the way, look it up. But in the middle of that, now let's also superheat a fucking chamber to 1,000 degrees.
Right.
No way.
No universe where that's happening. So where does that leave us? Well, scientists observe Earth and say, hey, we evolved to the point where we're in this beautiful synergistic relationship where everything is the circle of life, the circle of death, where everything, that biomass, the biomass of your body.
Mummies. Eat the mummies. Eat mummies.
You know where I'm headed. The biomass of your body, of your corpse, gets brought right back into the ecosystem. The creatures feed on it. It is preserved. It is conserved.
Mummy jerky.
So it seems that the wisest solution in dealing with the mass amounts of cadavers that we're going to have on Mars.
Say it, you motherfucker. Say it.
Is to just compost them right back into our food sources.
Compost is a cheat. Compost is a
not
cheat.
Eating them. It's putting them into the soil of whatever kind of greenhouses we build there. It's literally like bury them. What?
Cowards. Eat the mummies.
Well, I think that would be...
Add the mummy's power to your own.
I don't think that's how mummy power works.
That's how mummy power works. That's how everything works.
Yeah, so they're literally suggesting that wherever we grow our food and have crops on Mars...
That's why I have the power of a lentil.
Well, now I understand. wherever we're growing crops or have soil that we have brought from Earth in order to survive on Mars, we literally bury the dead in that, break it down. We actually have bioorganisms that we either bring with us on purpose or they just hitched a ride on our bodies from Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So they will be there anyway. And they will feed on, it'll basically kind of create a mini prehistoric Earth where they would feed on that biomass and re-ingest that into the soil that we're maintaining on Mars.
No, the way you're saying it makes more sense. But,
here's the fun part, though, Anthony. Here's the fun part of that plan, which does make sense.
Okay.
Until you consider that if we have a little mini ecosystem there with various bacteria and organisms, maybe even larger creatures like insects that we have cultivated and brought from Earth and brought there specifically for this purpose to break down bodies.
Yeah.
What do we do if nobody dies for a while and all those things have to still eat?
Draw straws, become a mummy.
This script is writing itself. You know what I'm saying? One among
us. The
us
ladybug's hunger
must feed the insects.
The Martian ladybugs demand to be fed.
If they die, we all die.
So I don't want to get too morbid, but and certainly this is not a morbid story. So it would be out of line for me to get morbid. But I will say this, Jeff.
Yeah.
So, Blue Origin is about to send Shatner into space.
Right. Yeah.
Shatner's 90. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Here's what I'm saying about our colonists.
We can eat Shatner?
Number one, you can eat Shatner and then add his power to your own, and then you would be a right-wing asshole. But Janeway for life. But we send some people because we think right now it'll take about 30 years, right? Something like that to get to Mars.
Yeah.
So we put some people on the ship that's going to Mars that are a little bit older. And they know why they're going.
Send the olds to Mars?
They know why they're going, but you're not old when you start. Is
this a Space Cowboys situation?
Yeah, this would be a specific situation where you are somebody who is, in your 50s, something like that, and you specifically say, I want my final resting place to be in space.
Want to be a space mummy?
I want to die in space. I've lived a good life.
One-way trip.
Yeah, I want to go. I mean, it's a one-way trip for everybody, but especially in the beginning. But you say to yourself, I'm going to help out however I can on this colony. Yeah. We're not just sending some old codger or whatever. We're sending somebody who's like, they're still a scientist or a researcher or engineer, somebody, but they know
Donald Sutherland,
Tommy Lee Jones. But we know that, they know that when they go, they're going to be as useful as they can for as long as they can. But they know when they hit the surface of Mars, they're going to be 70-something.
Right.
And it's their job to feed the ladybuggs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're here to help because you're a brilliant engineer, but also you're the first to feed the ladybugs, and you know that.
Yeah.
And that's what you signed up for. But let me also tell you this, Jeff. I don't think this is a concern. Somebody dies almost immediately.
That is the thing. That is, it feels like that's a certainty, but that's also a weird thing to put into the plan, is that we're just assuming someone's going to die all the time.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you think that space travel and military and all of this stuff, they don't have planned acceptable losses? Where do you think the term acceptable losses come from?
The actuary tables of space travel.
Baby, we send 50 people to Mars. I would love to see the numbers, but we send 50 people to Mars. I think we genuinely believe 2 of those people die within the first month or 2. Something's going to go wrong. Literally anything could go wrong on Mars and it's fatal. Unless you're Matt Damon.
I love the idea, though, that everybody beats the odds and they're just sitting around going, and ladybugs are going to die.
Those ladybugs are going to die.
One of us does.
And then what do we do with these space mummies?
That's when the space mummies rise up.
Now, here's the thing. You could potentially, I mean, I would imagine the colonizing does involve bringing some sort of, does the first colonization involve livestock, or is that later?
I don't know. That's a good question. That's a really good question. Yeah. Give it a pig, and all of a sudden now you've got like sacrifices to the bugs.
But not even, right? Because like you could kill, you could slaughter some livestock and throw some carcass victuals and some offal and stuff like that. You could throw it to the ladybugs. I know it's not ladybugs. Idea. I know it's not ladybugs that directly eat it, but it's just, it's funny to me.
It's nice, a nicer image.
Yeah.
You give it the head, the heads and anuses. It's just all the way down.
It's all heads and anuses. Oops, all heads and anuses. Bugs love that.
Yeah, I think that's probably doable if we're bringing livestock. If we're bringing, Now
I don't know if the first colonization involves that stuff, because I mean, obviously you're not going to be tending. Well, maybe you are tending livestock on the ship on the 30 years. Maybe people want burgers during the 30 years they're heading to Mars. But I would imagine the 30-year trip is mostly like paste. You're mostly eating space paste.
Yeah.
And then like maybe you have some embryos or something, You don't
want to eat the embryos.
No, but you have some embryos that you wait until they get to Mars, and then you hit the button on the embryos and they start cooking.
Yeah, they turn into pigs.
Yeah. I don't know how science. I got a big dumb lump.
Yeah, we both do. It's fascinating to me though, all the things like you were saying earlier. You go, I want to go to Mars. Yeah, that sounds like an adventure. And then every single one of these stories that we do about the actual reality of it, you go, that sounds fucked up.
Look, we say it, and we've been saying it since episode 1. And if you listen in the machete order, you might have missed it. But space wants you dead.
Space wants you dead.
And if you go into space, you go into space knowing that you are fighting the universe, which wants you dead.
It wants to turn you into a space zombie, which is the sequel to Space Mummies.
Right.
I'm working on that one.
Right. We put a chip inside of the mummy brains.
Yeah.
That reanimates them so they could work.
Yeah, we thought they could be a good workforce. We thought nothing bad could happen. We got all these mummies lying around.
Yeah, none of us had ever played or seen Doom. And so we were like, this will probably work.
Yeah. Name one scientist that's ever played Doom.
Come on. Name one way to even play Doom. What can you even play Doom on, I wonder?
Yeah, there isn't a single thing.
This is cool. So, I mean, like, this is what we're talking about, These are, when we talked about in the first story, we're thinking about really sci-fi shit right now because these brain implants aren't going to get anywhere for a really long time. There are people whose entire job is to speculate on this stuff.
Yeah, well, that's how stuff happens, right?
Yeah.
You have to start far thinking before you can near think,
Man, Farthink got canceled too early. Those puppets in Farthink.
It was
fucking amazing. Time. Yeah, it really was. I don't know. Like, how comfy would Mars have to get before you would go? In terms of voyage and living. Because I don't even go camping.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, are we talking, we need hotels on Mars for me to.
Is there a Disney cruise line on Mars yet?
I mean, I might go Airbnb.
I could Airbnb in Mars.
Yeah.
I could Airbnb. I don't know. It would take a while. The brave men and women who colonize Mars are certainly going to go down in history. But as mummies, as our first and best space mummies. But for me, it's just not worth it. I don't know. What do you concerned citizens think? We would love to hear whether you would go be a mummy in space. Let us know on the Discord.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. There's lots of cool folks hanging out on that Discord, and you only need $1 a month to be one of them. Patreon.com/wehaveconcerns.
Good night, all you ladybugs and mummies. You princes of Mars.